So, as most of you have probably noticed, when it comes to these Skylanders videos, whenever I'm talking about a Skylander, I usually do not show footage of said Skylander. And the reason why is because I don't exactly own all of them. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure that's been one of the biggest complaints I've gotten on the channel. But now I have actually found a way to get around this. Thanks to me learning about NFC cards and burning about $70 to get the proper resources to actually do it, I have access to the entire Skylanders roster. Literally everything you can think of, I have access to it. Swappers, Trap Masters, Cores, Legendaries, Chase variants for some reason. Hell, even the characters that never had figures and are hidden in the files. I have access to all of them. And wanting to find Skylanders to cover, I decided to go back to that little list of mine. And I would discover that there were a couple of Skylanders in there that I could talk about, and now I could actually play as them too. So I decided that I would make another Skylander Tossup and do a little bit of experimenting since, well, I only have 2 cards at the moment. And then I realized that out of all the Skylanders I picked, they were all Skylanders that I own. So yeah, that's just the plan for today. We are going to talk about a small group of Skylanders that I wanted to talk about for a little while now. So with that said and done, let's get going.
Armed and dangerous.
Now, for the longest of times, me and Slam Bam have had a very weird history for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, he's one of those Skylanders who was meant to have his own video that was mainly supposed to focus on Ice Skylanders, but that's when I realized that I had already used all the Ice Skylanders and he was kinda just left in limbo for a while. I also have him as a figure, specifically his Series 2, but for some reason I have zero clue where he came from and how he got in my bin. And what's crazy about this specifically is that I vaguely remember how and when I got every single one. With most of the Skylanders I own, I usually know where they came from, but for this guy, I just have no idea how he got into my Swap Force bag. Another weird thing I notice about him is the amount of variants he has, because he has so many that he's on par with some of the starter pack Skylanders, and I am including the mobile games as well in this. But with that said and done, it's about time that we get into his backstory and see what we can learn. Before he was a Skylander, Slam Bam was just your average 4-armed Yeti, or at least a somewhat normal 4-armed Yeti, as he lived most of his blissful yet solitary life on a floating glacier. He would surf the snowy slopes, study ice sculptures, using the knowledge to make ice sculptures of his own, and slurp his way through several squillion snow cones, which is quite a lot, and he would continue to live this lifestyle. But unknown to the Yeti, he was being watched by an evil eye that belonged to Chaos. Chaos watched him out of jealousy, as he wanted to learn the secret ingredient that he used in his snow cones, which gave them their sweetness. When his spy found, however, he would resort to doing the sensible and reasonable thing: destroying the glacier for absolutely no reason. This would leave poor Slam Bam drifting alone on an iceberg for several days, and he would drift alone before washing up at the Citadel. He would be found by Eon, and after a long conversation and multiple snow cones, Eon suggested that Slam Bam should become a Skylander, which he did, where he would go on to play a role in Eruptor Meets the Nightmare King, which is a story that I will discuss at a later time. Now, before we go on and talk about everything else, the main question I really have about this whole situation is, why did Chaos even do that in the first place? Now, if Slam Bam refused to give up his secret if Chaos pressed him for it, it would make a lot more sense. That's just Chaos being Chaos at that point, and he's caused problems over smaller things. But in this case, he didn't even say a word to him. That's like wanting McDonald's ice cream, and instead of asking if the machine works or just going in there and buying it yourself, you just go to the McDonald's and firebomb it because you didn't know how to make the ice cream yourself. On other topics, however, I kinda wonder why Slam Bam lived alone. Most of the other times we see 4-armed Yetis in the franchise, they're mostly social and with other Yetis, so I kinda wonder why Slam Bam is by himself here. But with that said and done, let's get going and see who's the next Skylander of today.
Fix is in.
When it comes to the next Skylander of today, Sprocket is a really interesting case because I not only own the Skylander, but I'm pretty sure that she's the most disliked from Giants. Even before I started my channel, I knew how bad Sprocket was getting it by many in the community. And to be perfectly honest, I'm pretty sure I was one of those people who hated Sprocket as a kid. Now, don't get me wrong, her design is really good and I learned to appreciate it in my older years, but her moveset just sucks. And that's coming from a person who unlocked everything only to reset her and never touch her again except for once. But with that said and done, let's actually take a look at her backstory and see if it's any good. Unlike most, Sprocket grew up in wealth as she was a goldling, a species in Skylands known for being extremely wealthy, and she grew up with all the privileges that a rich goldling would have. Despite being raised by a rich family, however, she didn't really care about the money or any of the other fancy stuff. In reality, her real calling was building and fixing machines. She learned how to do all this thanks to her uncle in his workshop, and she would have spent the rest of her life happily tinkering away and working on machines if Chaos didn't kidnap her uncle. Determined to rescue her mentor, she would construct a high-tech battle suit and grab the biggest wrench that she could find before setting off, leaving her life of luxury and wealth behind. But unfortunately, she had never managed to find him. But she had never stopped, and would decide to fight evil as well, going on to join the Skylanders afterwards, where she would go on to make an appearance in Terrafin Battles the Boom Brothers, which once again is a topic for another day. Now, to be completely honest here, I don't really have any thoughts on her backstory as much as I did with Slam Bam's, and the big thing that I'm wondering about is what her life looked like before she became a Skylander. I know that sounds really dumb at first, but what I mean by that is what her daily life outside the workshop looked like. What was the relationship between her and the rest of her family? Does she like to hang out with friends? Does she even have friends? Basically stuff like that. But with that said and done, I think that it's about time that we get into the final Skylander of today. Now, to be completely honest, out of all the Skylanders that I have covered today, Drill Sergeant has to be the one that took me by surprise the most, and it's mostly because he's an Arkeyan robot. I mean, you would have probably expected me to cover him, but I guess I haven't outside of that one lore video I made about the Arkeyans. So with that out of the way, let's take a quick moment to talk about his development history since it was documented. Before he was called Drill Sergeant, he went by the name of Drillbot, and when it came to his original design, you actually had to go and retrieve his rockets after you fired them, and for pretty obvious reasons, that was tossed in the bin. But Natlo did say that he was particularly hard to design, so with that said and done, let's get going. Even though we know that Drill Sergeant was part of the Arkeyan Empire, we don't exactly know about his history within the Arkeyan Empire. All we really know about him is that he was one of the uncountable robots that was buried under the earth after the Empire fell. He would remain underground with dormant systems for thousands of years until he was found by Terrafin, who had just so happened to be burrowing in the area before crashing into him. Terrafin would haul the machine above ground before dragging him off to Master Eon, and after the Portal Master muttered a few magical phrases, Drillbot would spring back to life and immediately turn his attention to Terrafin. According to Arkeyan law, Drill Sergeant was obligated to serve Terrafin as a servant for the rest of time, and Terrafin gave him a simple order for him to follow: stop following him. Even though Drill Sergeant found the order really tricky to compute, he would follow it zealously. But to him, Skylands was a bit senseless now, since there were no other Arkeyans around. So Eon decided to make him a Skylander, where he uses his drills to deliver death blows against evil. Now, this backstory is one that I really like since it makes the Skylanders feel a bit more connected than they are depicted in the games, well, at least outside of Imaginators and Superchargers. This also makes me think that Drill Sergeant joined the Skylanders before Chop Chop, due to that little tidbit from his backstory here. I also want to shout out the guy who quoted the books on the wiki and said which ones they came from, because that just made my life so much easier. But getting back on track, this actually makes me wonder in what order every Skylander joined, at least for the Skylanders in SSA. But with that said and done, this is where I'm going to end things off. Now, before I go, I just want to say that for this video, I want you all to take it with a grain of salt, since it was pretty rushed, as in I am recording it the night I finished it, and I only have like 6 hours to edit the whole thing. So it's not going to be as ironed out as most of my content usually is, but I still want to thank you all for watching. Like always, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this, share this around so I can grow the channel, leave some comments down below to make the algorithm happy, check out Return to Skylands, its Discord, and the link to the lore video all in the description below, and I will see you all in the next one.